My name is Sienna. I am 34 years old, and I am a Senior Forensic Auditor living in the heart of Chicago, Illinois. For 7 years, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. I was married to Terrence, a man I believed was a brilliant venture capitalist and the love of my life. I built a life with him, I supported his dreams, and I trusted him with every fiber of my being. But everything I knew about my marriage was a lie that unraveled in a single evening at a French restaurant called Le Monde. I was sitting there waiting to surprise him for our anniversary when my phone buzzed with a text from him saying he was stuck at work. Seconds later, a waiter walked up to me and whispered 7 words that changed my life forever. He said he is at table 7 with his fiancée. That was the moment the ground fell out from under me. That was the moment I stopped being a wife and started being an investigator. If you are watching this and you have ever felt that sinking feeling in your stomach that something is not right, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to my channel so you never miss a story about how the truth always comes to light. And please tell me in the comments what city you are watching from and what time it is right now, because I want to know how far this story is traveling. I need you to picture this. It was a Tuesday evening and the air inside Le Monde smelled like expensive truffle oil and old money. This was the kind of place where a salad cost $30 and you had to book a table 2 months in advance. Terrence always told me he hated this place. He said it was pretentious and a waste of money. But there I was, sitting in a velvet booth in the back corner, clutching a gift bag that held a vintage Rolex I had saved up for months to buy him. I wanted to surprise him because he had been so stressed lately about his startups and his investors. I wanted to remind him that I was in his corner. I checked my watch. It was 7:30. I had told him I was working late, so I could beat him home, but instead I came here because I knew he had a business dinner nearby, and I wanted to pick up the check as a power move for him. Then my phone vibrated against the white tablecloth. It was a text from Terrence. The screen lit up with his contact photo, a picture of us smiling in Cabo 2 years ago. The message read, "I am so sorry, babe. Board meeting is running late. Might be here until midnight. Do not wait up. Love you." He added a red heart emoji. I smiled, feeling a little disappointed but understanding. That was my husband always grinding, always working hard for our future. I started to type a reply telling him not to work too hard. That is when I saw Jamal. Jamal is my second cousin on my mother's side, a sweet kid putting himself through college by waiting tables here. I had not seen him in a year. He was walking toward my booth, but he was not smiling. He looked terrified. He was holding a pitcher of water, and his hands were shaking so hard the ice was rattling against the glass. He stopped at my table, and he did not even say hello. He just looked down at his shoes and then looked me dead in the eye. He whispered, "Sienna, I did not know you were coming here tonight." I smiled and said, "Hey, Jamal, it is a surprise. I am waiting for Terrence's meeting to wrap up nearby." Jamal turned pale. He looked like he was about to throw up. He leaned in closer, his voice barely a squeak. "Sienna, you need to listen to me, and you need to not scream. Terrence is not at a meeting." I frowned, confused. I just held up my phone. I said, "I just got a text from him. Jamal, he is at his office downtown." Jamal shook his head violently. "No, Sienna. He is here. He is at table 7. It is the private alcove behind the partition. He just ordered the Chateau Margaux, the $500 bottle." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. That specific wine was my favorite. We drank it at our wedding. I tried to laugh it off. I said, "Jamal, stop playing. Maybe he is here with investors." Jamal put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed it. "Sienna, he is not with investors. He is with a woman, a young white woman, and she is wearing a veil, like a bachelorette veil. And Sienna, he just asked for the champagne list because he said he is celebrating his engagement." The world stopped. The clinking of silverware, the soft jazz music, the chatter of the other diners, it all faded into a buzzing white noise. My blood ran cold. It felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. I looked at the text on my phone again. "Love you with the red heart emoji." I started to stand up. My first instinct was to march over there and flip the table. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by his expensive suit lapels and demand to know why he was lying. But then something shifted in my brain. I am a forensic auditor. I hunt corporate fraud for a living. I track missing money. I find patterns in chaos. I took a deep breath and sat back down. If I made a scene now, he would lie. He would say she is a client. He would gaslight me. I needed visual confirmation. I signaled Jamal to keep quiet. I slid out of the booth and crouched low using the large decorative ferns and the dim lighting as cover. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were steady. I moved toward the partition that separated the main dining room from the VIP alcove. I peeked through the leaves, and there he was. Terrence. My Terrence. He was wearing the navy blue Armani suit I bought him for his birthday. He looked handsome, confident, richer than he actually was. And sitting across from him was a girl who looked like she could be his daughter. She had blonde hair, big blue eyes, and she was wearing a cheap plastic veil clipped to her hair. She looked young, maybe 24. She was looking at him with total adoration, like he was the king of the world. But that was not what made me almost vomit. It was what Terrence was holding. He was reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a blue velvet box. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that box. I knew the logo stamped on top. And when he opened it, the sparkle hit me from 20 feet away. It was a 3-carat oval-cut diamond ring with a halo setting. I gasped so loud I had to cover my mouth with my hand. I knew that ring. I knew it because I saw the charge for it on my American Express Platinum statement last week. $25,000. When I asked Terrence about the charge, he told me he bought a watch for his mother's retirement gift and that he would pay me back once his commission check cleared. He bought his mistress an engagement ring with my credit card. I watched as he slid out of his chair and got down on one knee. The girl Harper covered her face with her hands and started sobbing happy tears. The entire restaurant seemed to pause. People at nearby tables started clapping. I pulled out my phone and hit record. My hand was trembling now, but I forced myself to focus. I zoomed in. I caught his smile, that fake charming smile he used to give me. I caught her saying yes. I caught him slipping my $25,000 onto her finger. I wanted to rush in there and ruin it. I wanted to scream that he was already married. But I didn't. I am a professional. You do not show your hand until you have all the cards. And right now, I only had one card. I needed the whole deck. I stopped recording and slipped back into the shadows. I motioned for Jamal to bring me the check for my water, but he just waved me off with tears in his eyes. I left a $100 bill on the table for him and slipped out the side exit before Terrence could see me. The night air outside was humid and heavy. I walked to the valet stand, my heels clicking on the pavement. I felt numb. I felt like I was floating outside of my body, watching a movie about someone else's tragic life. The valet brought around my car. It was a black BMW X5, another thing I paid for. The title was in my name, but Terrence drove it more than I did because he said it helped him close deals if he looked successful. I got in the driver's seat and locked the doors. The smell of his cologne, a musky sandalwood scent, was everywhere. It used to make me feel safe. Now it made me nauseous. I looked over at the passenger seat. There was a crumpled paper bag from a pharmacy tucked into the side pocket. I reached over and grabbed it. My auditor brain was in full swing now. Follow the paper trail. Inside the bag was not a receipt for mints or gum. It was a thick envelope with a logo from a private women's clinic in the suburbs, the Chicago Center for Women's Health. I opened the envelope. Inside was a receipt and a medical summary. The patient's name was typed clearly at the top. Harper Wilson, date of birth 2000. She was 24 years old. I scanned down the page. Prenatal vitamin prescription, ultrasound confirmation, estimated due date. She was 8 weeks pregnant. I looked at the payment method at the bottom of the receipt, Visa ending in 4598. I pulled my wallet out of my purse and looked at the supplementary card I had given Terrence for gas and emergencies. It was a Visa ending in 4598. He wasn't just cheating on me. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was building an entire second family on my dime. He was funding his new life, his new wife, and his new baby with the money I worked 80-hour weeks to earn, the money I saved while he played entrepreneur. I sat there in the dark parking lot for a long time. I watched the valet bring up other cars. I watched happy couples walking out of the restaurant holding hands. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 8:45 p.m. If I went home now, I would be waiting for him when he walked in the door. I would cry. I would scream. He would deny it. He would say the receipt was a mistake. He would say the ring was fake. He would gaslight me until I thought I was crazy. That is what he always did. He was a master manipulator. But Sienna, the wife, was dead. She died the moment she saw that ring. The woman sitting in the car now was Sienna, the Senior Forensic Auditor. And I do not cry over bad data. I investigate it, I expose it, and I prosecute it. I wiped a single tear that had managed to escape and checked my makeup in the rearview mirror. My eyes were hard, cold. I put the car in gear. I did not type home into the GPS. Instead, I typed in the address of my firm downtown, the Deloitte & Touche building. I was going to work. I had access to every bank account, every credit line, every investment portfolio, and every tax document with Terrence's name on it. If he wanted to play games with money, he picked the wrong opponent. He thought he was a venture capitalist. But tonight I was going to show him what a hostile takeover actually looks like. I merged onto the highway, the city lights blurring past me. The text message on my phone buzzed again. Another message from him, heading to a second location for drinks with the board. Do not wait up. Love you. I didn't reply. I just gripped the steering wheel tighter. I wasn't waiting up, Terrence. I was waking up. And by the time the sun rose over Chicago tomorrow morning, I would know exactly how much you cost me and exactly how I was going to make you pay it all back, with interest. The elevator ride to the 40th floor of the Deloitte & Touche building usually takes 45 seconds. Tonight, it felt like a lifetime. I watched the numbers climb higher and higher, leaving the noise of the city streets far below. By the time the doors slid open with a soft chime, the bustling Chicago skyline was just a sea of glittering lights outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The office was empty. The rows of cubicles were dark and silent, standing like tombstones in a graveyard. This was my domain. This was where I was powerful. Out there in the restaurant, I was just a wife who had been betrayed. But in here, in the cold blue light of the server room and the dual monitors of my corner office, I was a senior forensic auditor, and I was about to perform an autopsy on my own marriage. I sat down at my desk and didn't even turn on the overhead lights. The glow from my screens was enough. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing in passwords I knew by heart. Accessing our joint accounts was easy. But I knew Terrence. I knew that whatever game he was playing, he would try to hide it. He thought he was smart because he watched movies about Wall Street and read articles about cryptocurrency. He didn't realize that hiding money from a forensic auditor is like trying to hide blood from a shark. We can smell it in the water from miles away. I started with the basics. The joint checking account. It looked normal on the surface. Utility bills, groceries, the mortgage payment for our condo in the loop. But then I pulled up his personal accounts, the ones he thought I didn't have access to. 2 years ago, when Terrence lost his job as a marketing manager, he told me he wanted to pivot. He said he wanted to become a venture capitalist. He said he had the vision and the connections. I believed him. I was the supportive wife. I covered the bills. I paid the mortgage. I funded his lifestyle so he could have the appearance of success while he hunted for deals. I thought I was investing in our future. I pulled up the statements for his business account, the one under the name T-Squared Ventures. It was a ghost town. There were no incoming wire transfers from investors. There were no consulting fees. There was absolutely zero income for 24 months. The only deposits were transfers from our joint savings account money I had put there. And the withdrawals, they were sickening. $500 at a liquor store, $2,000 at a strip club in Atlanta, $3,000 for a suit tailor on Michigan Avenue. He wasn't building a business. He was cosplaying as a rich man using my paycheck. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. That was just bad behavior. I was looking for the crime. I navigated to the credit bureau portal. As an auditor, I have tools that go deeper than Credit Karma. I pulled his full credit report. My eyes scanned the lines of data looking for red flags, and then I saw it, a massive red flag waving right in my face. 6 months ago, a new line of credit had been opened, a secured loan. The collateral listed was a property in Savannah, Georgia. My heart stopped beating for a second. That address, 402 Willow Creek Lane. That was not our house. That was my mother's house. My mother is 70 years old. She worked for 30 years as a nurse's aide, changing bedpans and standing on her feet for 12-hour shifts to pay off that bungalow. It was her sanctuary. It was paid in full. It was the only thing of value she owned in this world. And right there on the screen in black and white pixels, it said there was a second mortgage taken out on it for $150,000. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me, hot and acidic. How was this possible? My mother would never agree to this. She was terrified of debt. I clicked deeper into the loan documents. I pulled up the digital copy of the promissory note. I zoomed in on the signature line at the bottom. There it was, Beatrice Washington, written in a shaky looped cursive. I stared at it until my eyes burned. It looked like her signature, but I knew it wasn't. The loop on the B was too wide. The slant was slightly off. I remembered coming home late one night 3 months ago and finding Terrence at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. He had jumped when I walked in, shuffling them into a folder. He said he was just organizing old tax documents. He wasn't organizing taxes, he was practicing. He was practicing my mother's signature so he could steal the roof from over her head. He had forged her signature to secure a loan. That was fraud. That was a felony. That was prison time. I slammed my hand down on the desk, the sound echoing in the empty office. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back. Not yet. I couldn't break down yet. I needed to know where that $150,000 went. It hit his account on a Tuesday. By Friday, it was gone. I followed the transaction trail. It was wired to an entity called Global Holdings LLC based in Nevada. To the untrained eye, it looked like a business investment. Maybe he really was investing in a startup. I copied the LLC's tax ID and ran it through a background check database we use for corporate due diligence. The search results populated in seconds. Global Holdings LLC was a shell company. It had been flagged 3 times by the IRS for suspicious activity. It was a known front for an online gambling syndicate based in the Caribbean. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. The pieces of the puzzle were slamming into place so fast it made me dizzy. Terrence didn't just have a spending problem, he had a gambling addiction. I dug further. I accessed his email. I didn't need to hack it. He had logged in on my iPad weeks ago and never logged out. I searched for the term Global Holdings. Nothing. I searched for debt. Nothing. Then I searched for the word owed. An email popped up from a sender named Vinny dated 2 days ago. The subject line was blank. The body of the email was short and terrifying. You are out of time, T. You are down 200 grand. The interest is compounding. You said the wedding was this month. You said the girl's daddy is loaded and the dowry would cover the spread. If we don't see a transfer by the 1st of the month, we aren't coming for your knees. We are coming for your wife. And we know where Sienna works. I read the email 3 times. My hands were trembling, hovering over the keyboard. This wasn't just about cheating. This wasn't just about a second family. This was about survival. Terrence was in the hole for $200,000 to loan sharks. He had gambled away my money, he had stolen my mother's equity, and he had lost it all. And that was where Harper came in. The picture was now crystal clear. Harper wasn't the love of his life. She was his bailout. She was his golden parachute. He needed to marry her, get access to her family's money, or a dowry, and use it to pay off the mob before they killed him or came after me. He was rushing the wedding not because of the baby, but because he had a gun to his head. I looked at the timestamp on the email. It was sent 48 hours ago. That explained the desperation. That explained the 3-carat ring he bought on my credit card. He had to seal the deal with Harper fast. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, but Peter was his wife, and Paul was a violent criminal, and now he was dragging a pregnant 24-year-old girl into the crossfire. I leaned back and swiveled my chair toward the window. The city lights looked different now. They didn't look beautiful. They looked sharp and dangerous. Terrence was a monster. He was willing to sacrifice everyone around him, me, my mother, Harper, his unborn child, just to save his own skin. He had committed wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, and forgery. I reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over the contact for the FBI field office. I had friends there. One call, and I could end this. I could have him arrested tonight. But then I thought about my mother. If I reported this now, the bank would seize her house as evidence. The legal battle to prove the forgery could take years, and she might lose her home in the process while the investigation dragged on. I couldn't risk that. I needed to clear the debt on the house first. I needed to make sure my mother was safe before I dropped the hammer. And I thought about Harper, that naive girl with the veil in the restaurant. She was carrying a baby. If Terrence went to jail tomorrow, she would be devastated, but she might still love him. She might think he was a martyr. She wouldn't know the truth. She needed to see him for what he was. And most importantly, I thought about myself. I thought about the 7 years of my life I wasted washing his clothes, cooking his meals, believing his lies. Prison was too easy for him right now. If he went to jail, he would just be another guy with a sad story. No. I wanted him destroyed. I wanted him to lose the money, the reputation, the girl, and the freedom all at once. I looked at the thread in the email again. We know where Sienna works. They thought I was the victim. They thought I was the weak link. They didn't know that I deal with corporate sharks every day. They didn't know that I was the one who took down the CEO of a Fortune 500 company last year for embezzlement. Terrence had made a fatal calculation error. He thought he was the main character in this movie. He thought he was the hustler. He was about to find out that he was just a line item on my spreadsheet, and I was about to audit him out of existence. I printed every document, the bank statements, the forged mortgage note, the gambling losses, the threatening emails. I organized them into a neat pile on my desk. The printer rhythmically spitting out paper was the only sound in the room. It sounded like a war drum. I had the financial proof. Now I needed the emotional leverage. I needed to turn his safety net against him. I needed Harper. I closed my laptop and stood up. I felt strong. The nausea was gone. The shock had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard determination. I checked my reflection in the dark window. The woman staring back at me didn't look like a heartbroken wife. She looked like a predator. I grabbed my purse and the stack of evidence. It was time to pay a visit to the suburbs. It was time to meet the other fiancé. Terrence wanted a wedding fine. I was going to give him a reception he would never forget. I typed the address from the medical receipt into my GPS, and I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach when I saw the destination pin drop on the map. It was not a stranger's house. It was a building I knew better than the back of my own hand. It was the Millennium Tower on the Gold Coast. It was one of the most exclusive addresses in Chicago, and I knew it because I owned Unit 42B. I bought that penthouse 3 years ago as an investment property using a trust fund my grandmother left me. It was supposed to be my safety net. It was supposed to be a rental income stream. Terrence had told me he finally found a tenant for it 6 months ago. He said it was a corporate lease for a visiting executive. He said he was handling the property management to take the stress off my plate. I believed him. I let him handle the keys. I let him deposit the rent checks, which I now realized were probably coming from my own savings account, just to keep up the charade. I drove through the city streets with a grip so tight on the steering wheel, my knuckles turned white. He had moved his mistress into my apartment. He was playing house with another woman in a property that I paid the mortgage on every single month. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its sociopathy. He wasn't just cheating, he was colonizing my life. I pulled up to the valet stand. The doorman, a kind older man named Robert, started to wave at me with a smile of recognition. I rolled down my window just an inch and put a finger to my lips, shaking my head slightly. Robert paused, confused, but he was a professional. He stepped back and gave me a formal nod, as if we were strangers. I couldn't risk him saying, "Good evening, Mrs. Williams," in front of the intercom. I walked into the lobby and approached the security desk. I didn't use my key fob. I needed to play this role perfectly. I smoothed down my blazer and adjusted my glasses. I pressed the buzzer for 42B. A female voice answered. It was light and airy and annoyingly happy. "Hello?" I cleared my throat and pitched my voice a little lower, more authoritative. "Good evening. This is Brenda from Mutual Assurance. I am here for the scheduled property appraisal regarding the updated insurance policy for Mr. Williams." There was a pause. "Oh." Terry didn't mention an appraisal. "But come on up. He is not here right now, but I can let you in." The buzzer sounded, and the heavy glass doors clicked open. I walked to the elevator, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Every step felt like I was marching into battle. I watched the floor numbers climb. 10, 20, 30, 40. When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, she was waiting for me. Harper. Up close, she was even younger than she looked in the restaurant. She was glowing. She wore a silk cream-colored maternity dress that hugged a small but undeniable baby bump. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a loose, messy bun that looked effortlessly chic. She looked like an angel, a home-wrecking angel living in my cloud. "Hi, I am Harper." She extended a hand with a warm smile. "Sorry about the mess, we are still getting fully settled. Terry is just so busy with the merger he keeps forgetting to tell me when people are coming by." I took her hand. It was soft. It was the hand of a woman who had never scrubbed a floor in her life. "I am Brenda," I lied smoothly. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Williams." I did it on purpose. I called her Mrs. Williams to see how she would react. She blushed, a pretty shade of pink rising to her cheeks. "Oh, not yet. But soon. Next month, actually. We are just getting everything ready for the baby." I forced a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Congratulations. Well, I won't take up much of your time. I just need to verify some structural details and high-value fixtures for the policy coverage. Please come in," she said, stepping aside. I walked into my own living room. It was surreal. It was like walking into a dream where everything is familiar but slightly wrong. The layout was exactly as I remembered. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan that I had fallen in love with. But the furniture was different. My sleek, modern gray sofas were gone. In their place were beige, overstuffed sectionals that looked like giant marshmallows. There were throw pillows everywhere, and photos. That was the hardest part. The mantel above the fireplace where I used to keep my collection of antique clocks was now covered in framed photos of them. Terrence and Harper on a boat. Terrence and Harper at a vineyard. Terrence kissing Harper's forehead. They looked happy. They looked like a legitimate couple. Harper followed me as I walked around the room pretending to take notes on my iPad. "This view is amazing, isn't it?" Harper sighed, looking out at the water. "Terry picked this place out specifically for me. He said he wanted our baby to look out at the horizon every morning. He is such a romantic." I stopped typing. A bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat, threatening to explode. "Terry picked this place. Terry didn't pick anything. I found this place. I fought a bidding war for this place. I signed the closing documents while he was at a bachelor party in Vegas." "That is very thoughtful of him," I said, my voice flat. "It must have been expensive. The market in this neighborhood is aggressive." Harper laughed, a tinkling sound. "Oh, money is no object for Terry. He is the CEO of a venture capital firm, you know. He bought this place cash. He didn't want us to have a mortgage hanging over our heads. He said a man provides a roof, no questions asked." I turned away so she wouldn't see the murderous look in my eyes. Cash. He told her he bought it cash. The man who had to steal from his wife's retirement fund to pay his gambling debts was playing the big-shot tycoon with my assets. He was living out a fantasy life, using my hard work as the stage props. And this kitchen Harper continued walking into the culinary space I had designed. Terry had this marble imported from Italy. He said nothing but the best for his family. I ran my hand over the cold Calicotta gold countertop. I remembered the day I picked this slab. I remembered arguing with the contractor about the vein matching. Terrence had been playing video games in the car while I did it. "It is exquisite," I said through gritted teeth. "Very rare. Do you want water? Or tea?" Harper asked, opening the Sub-Zero fridge. "My fridge." "No, thank you," I said. "I need to check the master bedroom and the secondary room." Harper led me down the hall. "We are turning the second bedroom into the nursery," she said excitedly. "You have to see it." She pushed open the door to what used to be my home office. I stopped dead in my tracks. The room had been transformed. The walls were painted a soft pastel yellow. There was a white crib in the center draped with sheer netting. A rocking chair sat in the corner. Stuffed animals were lined up on the shelves. It was a sanctuary. It was a room full of hope and love and new beginnings. And it broke my heart, not because I wanted a baby, But because Terrence had always told me he didn't want kids, for 7 years, every time I brought it up, he said he wasn't ready. He said he wanted to focus on his career. He said we were enough. And here he was building a nest for another woman, giving her the one thing he denied me. I walked over to the window, staring at the crib. "It is beautiful," I whispered. And this time, I wasn't lying. "Thank you," Harper said, rubbing her belly. "Terry is so excited. He talks to the baby every night. He's going to be such a good dad." I turned to look at her. Really look at her. She wasn't malicious. She wasn't evil. She was just a girl in love with a liar. She had bought the dream he sold her just like I did 7 years ago. She was another victim. She just didn't know it yet. I needed to wake her up, but I couldn't just shake her. I had to plant a seed. I had to make her pull the thread herself. I cleared my throat and tapped my iPad screen. "Harper, I have a question about the paperwork for the deed. You said he bought this cash." "Yes," she nodded. "Okay," I said, frowning slightly. "It is just that the name on the preliminary title search I pulled doesn't match Mr. Williams. It lists an LLC, a holding company, and usually when a property is bought cash, the deed transfer is immediate. But the county records are showing a discrepancy." Harper's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I looked at her with feigned concern. "I mean, sometimes in these high-value transactions, if the broker isn't careful, the title doesn't clear properly. Or sometimes, and I hate to say this, if the funds aren't verified, the ownership isn't actually transferred. The previous owner still holds the rights." She looked confused, her hand dropping from her belly. "But Terry has the keys. We live here." "Possession isn't ownership, honey," I said softly. "Look, I am just an appraiser, but I see this happen with these big CEO types sometimes. They move assets around. They leverage things. If I were you, especially with a baby coming, I would ask to see the physical deed. I would want to see my name, or at least my husband's name on that piece of paper. You don't want to wake up one day and find out you are technically squatting in someone else's investment property." The color drained from her face. "Squatting," I shrugged, looking casual. "It is probably nothing, just a clerical error. But you know how lawyers are. If the paperwork isn't right, the real owner could come in here with a sheriff and change the locks in an hour. It happens more than you think in this city." I saw the fear flicker in her eyes. It was a small spark, but it was there. That was all I needed. The seed was planted. She would ask him tonight. She would ask to see the papers, and Terrence would panic. He would have to lie again, and eventually he would trip. I checked my watch. "Well, I have everything I need. Thank you for the tour, Harper. You have a lovely home. Or, well, hopefully it is yours." I started walking toward the door. Harper followed me, but her bounce was gone. She was walking slower, looking around the apartment with new eyes. She was looking at the marble, the view, the furniture, and wondering if it was really real. "Wait," she called out as I reached the elevator. If there is a problem with the deed, how do I find out?" I turned back and gave her a small, tight smile. "Public records are online, Harper. They don't lie. People lie. But the county clerk's office never does." The elevator doors slid open. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, I saw her standing in the middle of the foyer, alone, clutching her stomach, looking terrified. I didn't feel guilty. I felt like a surgeon who had just made the first incision to cut out a tumor. It was going to hurt, but it was the only way to save the patient. I walked out of the building and got back into my car. My phone buzzed. It was Terrence. "Hey babe, meeting went great. Just wrapping up. Thinking about you. Can't wait to come home to my wife." I stared at the screen. I typed a reply. "Can't wait to see you too. I have a surprise for you." I didn't send it. I deleted it and threw the phone on the passenger seat. The game was on, and he had no idea he was already losing. The key turned in the lock at 2:14 in the morning. I was sitting on the living room couch in the dark, bathed only in the soft amber glow of the streetlights, filtering through the sheer curtains. I wasn't reading. I wasn't watching TV. I was just breathing, counting the seconds, calibrating my heart rate like a machine. I needed to be calm. I needed to be the Sienna he expected to find, not the Sienna who had just come from his mistress's apartment. The door swung open, and Terrence stumbled in. He tried to catch the door before it slammed, but his coordination was off. It clicked shut loudly, echoing in the silent hallway. He froze, looking toward the living room, squinting into the darkness. Sienna! He called out, his voice thick. You still up, babe? I clicked the lamp on. The sudden light made him wince. I stood up, smoothing the front of my silk robe, forcing my face into a mask of worried exhaustion. I was worried, T, I said, walking toward him. My voice trembled, but not from fear. It trembled from the sheer effort of not scratching his eyes out. You said you'd be home by midnight. It is almost 2:30. He let out a long, exaggerated sigh and loosened his tie. He looked disheveled. His top button was undone, his eyes were bloodshot, and there was a faint smear of something shimmery on his collar. Highlighter. Harper's highlighter. I walked right up to him and wrapped my arms around his waist. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. I pressed my face against his chest and inhaled. The smell hit me like a physical blow. Underneath the stale scent of whiskey and cigar smoke, there it was, vanilla and jasmine. It was the perfume Harper had been wearing. It was the smell of the diffusers in the penthouse I paid for. It was the smell of my betrayal. He tensed for a second, then patted my back awkwardly. I am sorry, babe. The board meeting went way over. Then the investors wanted to hit a few bars. You know how it is. You have to wine and dine these guys to get the check. I pulled back and looked up at him. I widened my eyes, playing the role of the naive, supportive wife. You work so hard for us, baby. I don't know how you do it. You must be exhausted. I am, he said, rubbing his temples. I am beat, but it is going to be worth it. Big things are happening, Sienna. Massive things. Let me get you some water, I said, guiding him toward the kitchen island. Sit down. You look dehydrated. He sat heavily on the bar stool, the leather groaning under his weight. I went to the fridge and pulled out a pitcher of water. I sliced a lemon with a sharp paring knife, the blade flashing under the kitchen lights. For a split second, I stared at his exposed neck as he leaned forward, head in his hands. I imagined how easy it would be. But no, that would be too quick. That would be mercy. And I was fresh out of mercy. I dropped the lemon slice into the glass and set it down in front of him. Here, drink. He gulped it down greedily. Thanks, babe. You are the best. You really are. He looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes. It wasn't love. It was calculation. He was looking at me like I was an ATM that was about to dispense cash. He licked his lips, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and leaned in. The alcohol gave him a false sense of confidence, but I could see the panic underneath. I knew about the deadline from Vinny. I knew he had 48 hours to pay up or lose his kneecaps. Babe, he started, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Listen, something came up tonight, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I leaned my hip against the counter, crossing my arms. Oh, what kind of opportunity? He stood up and started pacing the small kitchen space, using his hands to emphasize his points. It's crypto Sienna, but not like the regular stuff. This is an exclusive pre-sale for a new token backed by lithium mining in Nevada. One of the investors tonight, a guy from Silicon Valley, he tipped me off. It is going to 100x by next week, but the buy-in window closes tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes wide and manic. I need to get in Sienna. This is the break I have been waiting for. This is the deal that retires us. We could pay off your mom's house. We could buy a vacation home in Cabo. We could finally have that life you deserve. I nodded slowly, acting like I was processing his genius. That sounds amazing, T. So, how much is the buy-in? He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. $50, I asked innocently. No, Sienna, 50,000. I gasped, bringing a hand to my chest. $50,000, Terrence. We don't have $50,000 liquid. The savings account only has 10. I know, he said quickly, stepping closer and grabbing my hands. His palms were sweaty. But we do have it. In your 401k. In your retirement fund. I pulled my hands away, acting shocked. My retirement. Terrence, I can't touch that. The penalties are huge, and that is for our old age. He groaned, running a hand over his face. Sienna, stop thinking small. Who cares about a 10% penalty when we are going to make $5 million in a month? This is guaranteed. It is a lock. But I need cash. The platform doesn't take credit. He was lying through his teeth. There was no crypto token. There was no lithium mine. There was only a bookie named Vinny who wanted his 200 grand. He wanted my 50,000 to make a partial payment to buy himself another week of life. I looked down at the floor, biting my lip. I don't know, T. It scares me. What if we lose it? He grabbed my shoulders and gave me a little shake, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to intimidate. Do you trust me? Do you trust your husband? I am out here busting my ass every day for this family. I am trying to build an empire for us, and you are worried about some safe, boring retirement fund. You need to back me on this, Sienna. I need a partner, not an anchor. There it was, the manipulation, the gaslighting, making me feel like the bad guy for protecting my own money. I looked up at him, tears welling in my eyes. Fake tears. I do trust you, Terrence. I love you. I want you to be happy. Then sign the withdrawal request, he said, his voice hard. I already printed the form. It is in my briefcase. He didn't even wait for an answer. He spun around and grabbed his leather bag from the hallway floor. He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and slapped it onto the granite countertop. It was a hardship withdrawal form from my brokerage firm. He had already filled out the amount. $50,000. Reason for withdrawal, medical emergency. He handed me a black ballpoint pen from his pocket. Sign it. I will fax it over first thing in the morning. I took the pen. I looked at the paper. If I signed this, the money would be gone. Even if I called the bank later, it would be a mess to clean up. But if I refused, he might get violent. He was desperate. A desperate man is a dangerous man. I needed him to think he won. I needed him to go to sleep so I could keep working. I stared at the pen in my hand. Then I had an idea. Wait, I said, putting his pen down. This pen is leaking ink. Look, it got on your thumb. He looked at his thumb. There was nothing there, but he wiped it on his pants anyway. Just use another one, Sienna. Hurry up. I walked over to the junk drawer by the fridge. I rummaged through the mess of rubber bands and takeout menus until my fingers closed around it. A sleek silver pen. I had bought it online 3 years ago as a gag gift for a colleague who loved spy novels, but I never gave it to him. It was a heat-sensitive ink pen, the kind that erases completely when exposed to friction or heat. Or if you leave it alone for a few hours, the chemical bond in the cheap ink breaks down and fades to almost nothing. It wasn't instant, but it was unreliable. More importantly, I knew exactly how to sign my name so the bank would reject it. I walked back to the counter. I took a deep breath. Okay, I am doing this for us, because I believe in you. I bent over the paper. I pressed the tip of the pen to the signature line. Instead of my usual sharp, angular S, I wrote a looping, soft S. I misspelled my middle name, omitting a single letter. To the naked eye, looking at it quickly upside down, it looked like my signature. But to a verification algorithm at a bank, it was a mismatch. And just for insurance, I pressed lightly. The ink flowed blue and clear on the white paper. There, I said, straightening up. Terrence snatched the paper from the counter before the ink was even dry. He stared at it like it was a winning lottery ticket. He didn't check the spelling. He didn't check the slant. He just saw the $50,000. Thank you, baby, he breathed, folding the paper and shoving it into his breast pocket right next to his heart. You won't regret this. I promise. This is the start of everything. You have no idea, I thought. He came around the counter and kissed me on the forehead. His lips were wet and cold. Go to bed, Sienna. I'm going to stay up for a bit and watch the Asian markets open. I have some emails to send. He wasn't watching Asian markets. He was going to email Vinny a picture of the signed form to buy himself time. Okay, I said softly. Don't stay up too late. I walked out of the kitchen and down the hallway to our bedroom. I closed the door and leaned against it, listening. I heard the clink of the whiskey bottle against a glass. I heard him humming to himself. He was celebrating. He thought he had manipulated the stupid wife one more time. He thought he was safe. I walked over to the bed and sat down. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crash hitting me hard. I looked at the wedding photo on the nightstand. The glass was dusty. He had the paper, but the paper was worthless. By the time he tried to fax that in the morning, or by the time a clerk looked at it closely, the signature would be flagged. The bank would call me for verbal confirmation. And I would say, I never signed it. I would say my husband must be confused. I would freeze the account. But that wasn't enough. I needed to know exactly what his next move was. I pulled my iPad out from under the pillow. I opened the app connected to the hidden camera I had installed in the living room 3 months ago to watch the dog when we were at work. I hadn't checked it in weeks because the dog died last month, but the camera was still active. I watched the live feed. Terrence was sitting at the kitchen island. He had the form out again. He was taking a picture of it with his phone. Then he made a call. I turned up the volume on the iPad. "Yeah, Vinny," he said, his voice booming in the empty kitchen. "I got it. It is signed. The wire will hit your account in 48 hours. Yeah, I told you. My wife is a golden goose. She doesn't ask questions. She just signs where I tell her to. Yeah, we are good. Tell the boys to stand down." He laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. I watched him on the small screen drinking my whiskey in my kitchen, calling me a goose. "Sleep tight, Terrence," I whispered to the screen, "because tomorrow the goose is going to bite back." I turned off the iPad and lay down in the dark. I didn't close my eyes. I lay there plotting. He wanted a war, he just declared one. And he had no idea that he was sleeping in the barracks of the enemy. The investigation was over. The evidence was gathered. Now it was time for the execution. The morning sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office on the 40th floor, but I felt no warmth. I was sitting in my ergonomic leather chair staring at the elevator bank down the hall. I had been staring at it for 20 minutes. My assistant had buzzed me earlier to tell me that a frantic young woman was in the lobby demanding to see the senior auditor named Sienna Williams. She said it was a personal emergency regarding a property dispute. I told security to let her up. I knew who it was. I knew she would come. I had planted the seed of doubt in her mind last night in that penthouse, and it had bloomed faster than I expected. When the elevator doors finally slid open, Harper stepped out. She looked nothing like the glowing angel I had met yesterday. She looked like a wreck. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail that was coming loose, and her eyes were red and puffy. She was clutching a manila envelope to her chest like a shield. She was wearing a frantic expression, looking left and right at the busy office floor until her eyes locked on me sitting in the glass-walled corner office. I didn't stand up. I just watched her march toward me. She was angry. Good. Anger is better than denial. Anger means you are looking for answers. She pushed open my glass door without knocking. She slammed the envelope down on my desk. The sound made my crystal paperweight jump. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "You are not Brenda from the insurance company. I called Mutual Assurance this morning. There is no Brenda who does property appraisals, and when I went to the county clerk's office as soon as they opened the deed to the penthouse, didn't say Terrence Williams, it said Sienna Williams." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You are Sienna Williams. I looked you up. You work here. Why did you lie to me? Why did you come into my home and pretend to be an appraiser? Are you his ex-wife? Are you trying to steal our apartment?" I looked at her calmly. I took a slow sip of my black coffee. I needed to de-escalate her, but I also needed to break her. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. If I pushed too hard, she might run back to Terrence and tell him I was on to him. If I didn't push hard enough, she wouldn't believe me. "Please close the door, Harper," I said, my voice low and steady. She didn't move. She stood there breathing hard, her chest heaving under her maternity blouse. "I am not closing anything until you tell me what the hell is going on." Terrence is not answering his phone. I have been calling him for 3 hours. Where is he? Did you do something to him? I stood up then. I walked slowly around my desk. I am not tall, but in my heels and my tailored suit. I carry myself with a presence that usually makes people step back. Harper didn't step back, but she flinched. "I didn't do anything to him, Harper," I said. "But he has done quite a lot to both of us." I gestured to the conference room adjacent to my office. It was a soundproof glass fishbowl, private but visible. "Come with me. I have something to show you. And if you walk out of here after seeing it and still want to marry him, I will sign the deed over to you myself." That got her attention. She hesitated, glancing at the envelope on my desk, then back at me. She nodded once jerkily. We walked into the conference room. I dimmed the lights and tapped the touchscreen on the mahogany table to activate the wall-mounted monitor. I had prepared a simple presentation. 3 slides. That was all it took to destroy a life. "Sit down," I said, pulling out a chair for her. She sat down, but she perched on the edge of the seat, ready to bolt. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach, protecting her unborn child. I pressed the button for the first slide. A high-resolution photo filled the screen. It was a beautiful photo. It was taken 5 years ago on a beach in Maui. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. In the center of the frame, a man and a woman were kissing. The man was wearing a linen suit. The woman was wearing a white lace gown. Harper gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. The man was Terrence. He looked a little younger, a little thinner, but it was undeniably him. And the woman in the dress was me. "That is a Photoshop," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That is fake. He told me he was married before, but it was a mistake. He said it lasted 6 months and she was crazy. He said he has been divorced for 10 years. I didn't argue. I just tapped the screen again. The image changed. This was a document, a marriage license dated 7 years ago, and right next to it, a screenshot from the Cook County Court records taken this morning. Status active. "I am not his ex-wife, Harper," I said softly. "I am his current wife. We celebrated our 7th anniversary last night. Or at least I tried to. I was sitting at Le Monde waiting for him while he was proposing to you at table 7. "No," she moaned, shaking her head violently, tears starting to stream down her face. "No, that is not true. He loves me. He bought the penthouse for me. He is a CEO. I clicked to the next slide. This one was painful. It was a split screen. On the left was a photo of her ultrasound, which I had pulled from Terrence's cloud account, the little black and white bean that was her baby. The name on the top said Baby Williams. On the right side of the screen was a credit card statement, my American Express statement. I highlighted the line items in red. The charge for the ultrasound at the private clinic, the charge for the prenatal vitamins, the charge for the maternity clothes she was wearing right now, and the charge for the 3-carat diamond ring currently sitting on her finger. "Look at the card number, Harper," I said, pointing at the screen. "Visa ending in 4598. That is my supplementary card. It is linked to my salary. I paid for your doctor's appointment. I paid for your vitamins. I paid for that ring." Harper stared at the screen. She was hyperventilating now, rapid, shallow breaths that sounded like she was drowning. She looked down at her hand at the ring she had been so proud of. She looked at it like it was a poisonous spider. "He doesn't have any money, Harper." I continued, my voice relentless but not cruel. "He is not a CEO. He is an unemployed gambler who is $200,000 in debt to the mob. He is not marrying you because he loves you. He is marrying you because he needs your father's money to pay off his hitmen." She let out a sound that I will never forget. It was a wail, a low, guttural sound of pure heartbreak. She slumped forward onto the table, burying her face in her arms. I am a Christian," she sobbed, her voice muffled by her sleeves. "I grew up in the church. I waited for marriage. I thought he was my blessing. My parents, they are going to die. I am a mistress. I am a homewrecker. I am carrying a married man's baby." I watched her crumble. This was a girl who had done everything right by her own standards. She was the golden child, the innocent one, and Terrence had turned her into the other woman. He had defiled her faith and her identity just to save his own skin. I walked over to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. She flinched but didn't pull away. "You are not a homewrecker," I said firmly. "You are a victim. He lied to you just like he lied to me. He used us both. He used my money and he used your innocence." She looked up at me, her face streaked with mascara. Her eyes were full of terror. "My baby," she whispered. "What about my baby? He talks to the baby every night." Was that a lie too? I pulled up a chair and sat next to her. I looked her dead in the eye. "Harper, he told me he never wanted children. He made me take birth control for 7 years. He told me kids were a burden. The only reason he is playing the doting father is because that baby is his ticket to your family's bank account. Last night he tried to make me liquidate my retirement fund. He told me he needed it for a crypto investment. He needs money and he doesn't care who he destroys to get it." She stared at me, processing the horror of it. Then a new fear dawned on her face. He knows I am here," she stammered. "I texted him. I told him I was coming to find the owner. I told him I was coming to find Sienna Williams." My blood ran cold. "You did what I texted him," she cried. "I said I found the deed and I was coming to your office." I stood up instantly. If Terrence knew she was here, the game had changed. He would be in panic mode. He would be dangerous. Suddenly Harper's phone, which was sitting on the table, lit up. It was him. I stared at the screen. It was a FaceTime request. "Answer it," I ordered. I can't," she sobbed. "Answer it," I repeated sharper this time. "Put it on speaker. Do not show him where you are. Just show him your face. You have to act normal." She picked up the phone with shaking hands. She wiped her eyes frantically, trying to compose herself. She accepted the call. Harper Terrence's voice filled the room. It was tight, anxious. "Where are you? Why did you text me that crazy stuff about the deed?" Harper looked at me. I nodded, encouraging her. I just went to the bank." "Terry," she said, her voice wavering. "The clerk said a woman named Sienna owns the apartment. I am scared, Terry. Are we being scammed?" There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. "Babe, listen to me." Terrence said, his voice shifting into that smooth, hypnotic tone I knew so well. "You are confused. The hormones are making you paranoid. Sienna she is my sister. I put the house in her name for tax reasons. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to bore you with the financial details. She is just holding it for us." I felt a surge of rage so powerful I almost grabbed the phone. His sister. He had demoted his wife of 7 years to his sister. "Oh," Harper breathed. She was a terrible liar, but fear was making her convincing. "Your sister?" "Yes," his sister Terrence said. "Look, I am coming to pick you up. Where are you?" I held up a piece of paper on which I had scribbled, "Do not tell him. I am at a coffee shop downtown." Harper stammered. I just needed to think. "Okay, stay there. Send me your location. We will go get lunch. I will explain everything." "I love you, Harper. You and the baby are my whole world. Do not listen to anyone else. Just listen to me." He hung up. Harper dropped the phone on the table as if it were burning hot. She looked at me. "He said you are his sister." "He is a sociopath," I said. She put her head in her hands again, rocking back and forth. "What do? I can't marry him. I can't go back to him. But my dad, the wedding is in 2 days. The invitations are sent. The guests are flying in. If I cancel now, the shame. My father will disown me. I am pregnant and unmarried. In my community, that is social suicide." I looked at this broken girl. I saw myself 7 years ago, blind and trusting. I saw the opportunity. I could just send her away. I could tell her to go home to her parents and deal with the mess. But that wouldn't punish Terrence. That would just let him slip away to find another victim. "No," I said slowly. "No," I said. "You are not going to cancel the wedding." She looked up at me shocked. "What? You want me to marry him?" "No," I said. "I want you to walk down that aisle. I want you to let him think he has won. I want you to let him stand at that altar in his expensive suit, thinking he has fooled us all. And then when the moment is right, we are going to burn his world to the ground." I leaned in closer. "Harper, you have 2 choices. You can be the victim who got scammed and ran away in shame, or you can be the woman who helped bring down a predator. You can save the next girl. You can save yourself, and you can get revenge for your baby." She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Her eyes searched mine. I saw the fear receding, replaced by a tiny spark of anger. The same anger I felt. "He lied about the baby," she asked, her voice quiet. "He really didn't want it." I pulled up an email on my phone, one I had found last night. It was to his old college buddy, sent 2 weeks ago. It read, "Stuck with the blonde. She got knocked up. Trapped me. Gonna have to marry her for the payout, but once I get the cash, I will find a way to ship the kid off to boarding school or something. I can't deal with a screaming brat." I handed her the phone. "Read it," I said. She read it. Her face went pale, then red. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the phone. She read it again and again. When she looked up, the tears were gone. In their place was cold, hard hate. A mother's hate. The most dangerous kind of hate in the world. "He called my baby a brat," she hissed. "Yes, he did." She handed me the phone back. She stood up and smoothed down her maternity blouse. She took a deep breath, and when she exhaled, she looked different. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Tell me what to do," she said. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled genuinely in 24 hours. "We are going to give him the wedding of his dreams," I said. "And then we are going to turn it into his funeral." But first, you need to dry your eyes. He is coming to pick you up. You have to be an actress, Harper. Can you do that?" She placed a hand on her stomach. "For my baby," she said. "I can do anything." "Good," I said. "Now let's go over the plan, because we only have 48 hours to orchestrate the perfect disaster." I watched her walk to the bathroom to fix her makeup. The naive girl who walked in here was gone. In her place was a soldier. Terrence had made a mistake. He thought he was juggling two women who would fight each other for his affection. Instead, he had united us. And he was about to find out that hell hath no fury like two women scorned working on the same project plan. "You have two options, Harper," I said, leaning forward across the mahogany conference table. My voice was low and steady, the voice I used when I was closing a deal with a hostile witness. "Option 1 is you walk out that door right now. You go meet Terrence for lunch and you cry and you scream and you tell him you know everything. He will deny it. Then when he realizes he can't lie his way out of it, he will run. He will disappear. He will find a new city and a new victim, and he will leave you with a broken heart and a baby to raise alone. And you will never see a dime of child support because men like him are ghosts on paper." Harper shuddered. She was twisting the diamond ring on her finger, the ring that I paid for. I could see the terror in her eyes, the terror of the unknown, or I continued locking eyes with her. "You take option 2. You become my partner. You help me finish what he started. You marry him. You let him think he has pulled off the scam of the century. And while he is busy celebrating, I will be busy closing the steel trap around his neck." I paused to let the words sink in. "If you help me, Harper, I will make sure you are taken care of. I have tracked his finances for 7 years. I know where he hides the money he hasn't gambled away yet. He has a crypto wallet he thinks is untraceable, but I have the keys. He has a stash in an offshore shell company. If we send him to prison for fraud and bigamy, I will file a civil suit that will freeze those assets before he can touch them. I will ensure that every single penny goes to you and that baby. You won't just get justice, you will get security." Harper looked at me. Her eyes were still red, but the tears had stopped. She looked down at her stomach. "He really has money hidden?" she asked, her voice small. "He does." I lied. Technically, Terrence was broke. The assets I was talking about were mostly imaginary or so tied up in debt they were worthless. But I needed Harper to have a financial incentive. I needed her to feel like she was fighting for her child's future, not just for revenge. Hope is a powerful drug, and I was dealing it by the pound. "Yes," I said firmly, "enough to send that baby to college. But only if we catch him. Only if we nail him for bigamy and grand larceny. If he runs now, we get nothing. We need him to say I do. We need the crime to be completed." Harper took a deep breath. She sat up straighter. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the monitor. She touched her hair, smoothing back the flyaways. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I will do it. I will marry him." "Good," I said. "Now wipe your face. Fix your makeup. Go meet him for lunch. Tell him you were just stressed. Tell him you love him. Be the sweet, naive girl he thinks you are. Can you do that?" She nodded slowly. "I was captain of the drama club in high school," she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "I can play a role." "Excellent." But then her face fell. She looked stricken. "Wait," she said, her eyes widening in panic. "There is a problem. A big problem." What I asked. "My brother," she said. "Brad. He hates Terrence. He has always hated him. Brad is a lawyer. A corporate litigator. He ran a background check on Terrence when we first started dating, but Terrence had used a fake social security number so nothing came up. But Brad never bought it. He has been watching him like a hawk." I frowned. A suspicious brother was good. A suspicious brother who was a lawyer was dangerous. If he found out too early, he would blow the whole operation. "What about Brad?" I asked. "He is coming to the rehearsal dinner tonight," Harper said. "And he told me yesterday that he found something. He didn't say what, but he said he was going to confront Terrence tonight. He said he was going to expose him in front of Dad. If Brad does that, if he scares Terrence off before the wedding..." My plan was crumbling. If this cowboy lawyer stormed in and started throwing accusations, Terrence would bolt. He would flee the state, and I would lose my chance to destroy him publicly. I would lose my chance to have him arrested at the altar. "Where is your brother now?" I asked, standing up and grabbing my purse. "He is at his firm," Harper said. "Sterling and Finch. It is on Wacker Drive. I know the firm. It was a prestigious white shoe law firm. High power, high arrogance. Call him," I ordered. "Tell him you are busy with wedding prep, but that your wedding planner is coming to see him to drop off the itinerary. Tell him it is urgent." Harper pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking again. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to handle him," I said, checking my reflection in the glass wall. I straightened my blazer. "I am going to make him an offer he can't refuse." 20 minutes later, I was walking into the lobby of Sterling and Finch. It smelled like old leather and money. The receptionist looked me up and down with that polite disdain that black women in corporate America know all too well. "I am here to see Bradley Wilson," I said, my voice clipping the air. "I am the wedding coordinator for his sister." She raised an eyebrow but picked up the phone. A minute later, a young associate came out to escort me. Brad's office was exactly what I expected. Corner view, heavy oak desk, diplomas from Yale and Harvard displayed prominently, and sitting behind the desk was Brad. He was handsome in a generic way. Blonde hair, blue eyes, sharp jawline. He looked like the villain in a college movie. He didn't stand up when I walked in. He just leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers. "You are the wedding planner?" he asked skeptically. "You look more like an accountant." I didn't smile. I closed the door behind me and locked it. The click echoed in the large room. "I am not a wedding planner, Brad," I said, walking straight up to his desk. "I am a senior forensic auditor, and I am also Terrence Williams's wife." Brad stopped spinning the pen. He stared at me. He blinked once, twice. Then he let out a short bark of laughter. "Excuse me," he said. "Did you say wife?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the file. I slapped it onto his desk, right on top of his expensive leather blotter. "Read it," I said. He looked at me, then he looked at the file. He opened it. I watched his face. I saw the arrogance drain away, replaced by shock, and then pure, unadulterated rage. He flipped through the marriage certificate, the bank statements, the emails, the medical bills. His face turned a dangerous shade of red. The veins in his neck bulged. "That son of a bitch," he whispered. "That motherfucker." He stood up so fast his chair slammed into the wall. "I am going to kill him," he roared, grabbing his jacket. "I am going to go find him right now, and I am going to beat him until he stops moving. He got my little sister pregnant. He has been stealing from her." He started to storm toward the door. "Sit down, Brad," I shouted. My voice cracked like a whip. He stopped, hand on the doorknob, turning back to glare at me. "Get out of my way," he snarled. "He is dead." "If you walk out that door," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm, "you are letting him win." He froze. "What?" I walked over to him. "You are a lawyer, Brad. Think. You beat him up. What happens? Assault charges for you. He sues you. He plays the victim. He disappears. He leaves Harper broken and humiliated, and he goes on to find the next girl. Is that justice? Is that what a Yale law graduate calls a win?" Brad breathed heavily, his chest heaving. "He is a predator," he spat. "Yes, he is," I agreed. "And you don't hunt a predator by running at it screaming. You hunt it by setting a trap." I guided him back to his chair. He sat down reluctantly, his hands clenched into fists on the desk. "What do you want?" he asked, looking at me with new respect. "I want him destroyed," I said. "Not just beaten up. I want him in federal prison. I want him bankrupt. I want him humiliated in front of everyone he tried to impress." I laid out the plan. I told him about Harper's role. I told him about the police waiting in the wings. I told him about the bigamy charge, which carries a mandatory sentence. I told him about the fraud. If you confront him tonight at the rehearsal dinner, I explained he runs. We lose the bigamy charge because he never actually married her. We lose the leverage. But if you wait, if you let him say, "I do" tomorrow, then we have him. He commits a felony in front of 200 witnesses and a video crew. Brad listened. I could see the lawyer brain engaging, overriding the protective brother brain. He rubbed his chin, calculating. "So you want me to shake his hand tonight? Brad asked, his voice full of disgust. You want me to toast him? I want you to be the best brother-in-law in the world, I said. I want you to smile. I want you to buy him a drink. I want you to lull him into a false sense of security, because the happier he is tonight, the harder he falls tomorrow. Brad looked down at the photo of Terrence and me on the beach. He shook his head. You are scary, he said. I took that as a compliment. I am a woman who wants her life back, I said, and I want to save your sister. Harper is a good kid. She didn't know. She is a victim in this too. Brad sighed, running a hand through his perfect hair. She called me, you know. She sounded terrified. I thought she was getting cold feet. I didn't know she was sitting across from the other wife. We are a team now, I said. Me, you, and Harper. Brad was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out his hand. Okay, he said. I will do it. I will hold my fire. But tomorrow, when the police come, I want the first punch. I shook his hand. His grip was strong. Get in line, I said. I left Brad's office feeling a strange sense of calm. The pieces were all in place. I had the evidence. I had the mole. I had the muscle. The trap was set. My phone buzzed as I stepped out into the sunlight. It was a text from Terrence. Hey babe, just booked us a surprise weekend getaway for next month. Maldives. I am going to make so much money on this deal, I want to spoil you. I stared at the screen. He was so confident, so delusional. He was probably booking that trip with a credit card he planned to open in Harper's name the second the marriage certificate was signed. I typed back, Wow, I can't wait. You are the best husband ever. I put the phone away. Tonight was the rehearsal dinner. I wouldn't be there physically, but I would be there digitally. Brad had agreed to wear a wire. He had agreed to keep his phone line open so I could listen in. I was going to sit in my empty apartment with a bottle of wine and listen to my husband toast his new life. I hailed a cab. The driver asked me where to. I gave him my home address. But in my head, I was already at the church. I was already visualizing the moment the doors would open. The wait was the hardest part, knowing that right now Harper was having lunch with him, letting him kiss her, letting him touch her belly. It made my skin crawl. But she was strong. I saw it in her eyes. She was fighting for her cub, and I was fighting for my dignity. Terrence Williams had spent 7 years underestimating me. He thought I was just a paycheck. He thought I was boring, reliable Sienna. He didn't know that I was the one who balanced the books. And tomorrow I was going to balance them with a vengeance. The red ink was about to flow, and it wasn't going to be mine. The next 24 hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I was living in a cage with a tiger that was slowly starving to death. Terrence was unraveling right in front of my eyes. The man who prided himself on his smooth talk and his designer suits was gone. In his place was a sweating, twitching, desperate junkie addicted to the adrenaline of his own lies. The $50,000 from my retirement fund had not cleared yet. I had made sure of that. I had called the bank from my office bathroom and flagged the transaction as suspicious, which put a 48-hour hold on the funds. When Terrence checked the account balance every 10 minutes, he saw zero. He was vibrating with rage. He paced our living room like a caged animal. He yelled at the television. He kicked the coffee table. He screamed at me for buying the wrong brand of almond milk. I just took it. I played the role of the scared, submissive wife perfectly. I apologized. I cleaned up the spilled milk. I asked him softly if his crypto deal was okay. Every time I mentioned the word crypto, he looked like he wanted to strangle me. Sienna, stop asking stupid questions, he snapped at me over dinner. You don't understand how high finance works. The blockchain is congested. The funds are in transit. Just shut up and let me think. I shut up. But I wasn't just letting him think. I was watching him die. He spent half the night on the balcony chain-smoking cigars. I watched him through the sheer curtains. He was on the phone constantly. I didn't need a wiretap to know who he was talking to. It was either Vinny the loan shark threatening to break his legs, or Harper the golden goose he was trying to keep in the pen. I could hear his voice shifting gears. 1 minute he was pleading with Vinny, his voice high and cracked with fear. I swear Vinny the wire is initiated. It is a banking error. I have the money. Just give me 2 more days. Please, man, don't send the boys. Then he would hang up, take a deep breath, and dial Harper. His voice would drop an octave, becoming smooth and honeyed. "Hey, baby, just checking in on my two favorite girls. How is the tummy?" "Yeah, I am just wrapping up some loose ends at the office so I can be totally free for our wedding. I can't wait to make you Mrs. Williams." It was sickening. It was a performance that deserved an Oscar for villainy. But the cracks were showing. The real danger started on the evening before the wedding. The rehearsal dinner had been canceled by Harper, per our plan. She told him she had morning sickness and wanted to rest. Terrence was furious because he wanted to schmooze her father, but he couldn't force a pregnant woman to party. So he was stuck at home with me, and he needed to get out. I knew he had a meeting. Vinny had probably given him a final ultimatum, face-to-face, cash or consequences. Terrence needed to leave the apartment at midnight, but he couldn't leave me awake. If I was awake, I might ask questions. I might follow him. I might see who he was meeting. I was sitting on the couch pretending to read a book when he walked into the living room. He was holding 2 mugs. Steam was rising from them. "Babe," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I am sorry I snapped at you earlier. I am just so stressed with this deal. I made you some of your favorite chamomile tea. It will help you relax." He placed the mug on the coaster in front of me. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were watching that mug with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. I looked at the tea. The liquid was dark, and there was a tiny cluster of white bubbles clinging to the rim. Powder. Undissolved sediment. My heart hammered against my ribs. He wasn't just a fraudster anymore. He wasn't just a cheater. He was crossing the line into physical assault. He had crushed up something, probably Xanax or sleeping pills, and put it in my drink. He was drugging his wife. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. This was it. This was the moment I stopped seeing him as a human being and started seeing him as a target. "Thank you, T," I said, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "That is so sweet of you. You are right. I am so tired." "Drink up," he urged. "It is hot." I lifted the mug. I brought it to my lips. I smelled the tea, but underneath the floral scent, I smelled the chalky bitterness of chemicals. I faked a sip. I said. "It is perfect." I held the mug in my hands, letting the warmth seep into my palms. I yawned. A big, exaggerated, theatrical yawn. "I am going to take this to bed," I said, standing up. I can barely keep my eyes open. "Good idea," he said. "Go to sleep, Sienna. Sleep deep." I walked to the bedroom. I didn't drink a drop. I went into the ensuite bathroom, turned on the faucet to mask the sound, and poured the entire mug down the sink. I watched the brown liquid swirl down the drain, carrying his poison with it. I rinsed the cup and left it on the nightstand with a few drops remaining at the bottom to make it look used. Then I changed into my pajamas, turned off the lights, and got into bed. I lay there in the dark, breathing rhythmically, waiting. 10 minutes later, the door creaked open. A sliver of light from the hallway cut across the bed. Terrence stood in the doorway. He was watching me, checking to see if the drugs had worked. I didn't move a muscle. I kept my breathing heavy and slow. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I was a statue of unconsciousness. He walked into the room. He came right up to the side of the bed. He waved his hand in front of my face. I didn't flinch. Out cold, he whispered, "Stupid bitch." He turned and walked out of the room, but he didn't close the door all the way. He assumed I was comatose. He assumed he was safe. He walked back into the living room, and I heard the sliding glass door to the balcony open. I threw off the covers. I moved silent as a ghost. I crept to the bedroom door and peeked out. He was pacing on the balcony again, phone to his ear. I didn't need to get closer. The night air was still, and his voice carried, and what I heard him say froze the blood in my veins. "Yeah, Vinny, I am leaving now. I will be there in 20 minutes. Listen, you need to chill. The plan is airtight." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "No, the money isn't coming from Sienna anymore," he said. His voice was dripping with contempt. "Sienna is tapped out. She is dry. But the new one, Harper, she is a golden goose. Her daddy is worth $50 million. Once I put a ring on her finger tomorrow, I have access to the trust fund. I will pay you double just to shut you up." I gripped the doorframe so hard my fingernails dug into the wood. Golden goose. That was all I was to him. That was all Harper was. Poultry to be slaughtered for his debts. But he wasn't done. The next words were the ones that sealed his fate, the words that turned my desire for revenge into a holy crusade. "What about Sienna?" he laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "Don't worry about the old ball and chain. I have a plan for her too. Once the Harper deal is sealed, I am filing for divorce. But not a normal divorce. I have been documenting her instability. I am going to say she had a mental break. I will say she is a danger to herself." He took a drag of his cigarette and exhaled the smoke into the night. "I am going to put her in a psych ward, Vinny. A state facility, the cheapest one I can find. I will get power of attorney over her assets while she is locked up, and then I will sell the condo and the car. That old black wife of mine is worth more to me crazy than she is sane. She is just a stepping stone, man. A rusty old stepping stone." I stopped breathing. The world stopped spinning. Psych ward. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He wasn't just planning to steal from me. He was planning to erase me. He was going to use his gaslighting, his manipulation, and the drugs he was feeding me to paint me as insane. He was going to strip me of my freedom, my career, my dignity, and lock me away in a padded room so he could cash out the last few dollars of my life. He called me a rusty old stepping stone. I backed away from the door. I walked backward until my legs hit the bed. I sat down. I didn't cry. There were no tears left. Tears are for pain. This wasn't pain. This was clarity. Absolute crystal clear clarity. For months I had wondered if I was being too harsh. I had wondered if maybe there was a part of him that still loved me. I had wondered if he was just a man in trouble who made bad choices. But now I knew. He was evil. Pure distilled evil. He was a parasite who would consume a host until it was a husk and then move on to the next one. He had no soul. He had no conscience. He was going to try to put me in a cage. I looked at my hands in the dark. They were strong hands, capable hands. Hands that had built a career. Hands that had signed mortgage papers. Hands that had cared for him when he was sick. He thought these hands were weak. He thought these hands were tied. He had no idea that these hands were currently holding the detonator to his entire life. I heard the front door open and close. He was gone. He was driving to meet his loan shark to promise him money he didn't have based on a marriage that was a trap. I stood up. I went to the window and watched his taillights fade into the distance. "Go ahead, Terrence," I whispered to the empty street. "Go meet your fate. You think you are walking down an aisle tomorrow toward a pot of gold? You are walking onto a scaffold. And I am the executioner." I went to the kitchen and made myself a fresh cup of tea. Real tea. I drank it standing in the middle of the dark living room, staring at the spot where he had stood. The timeline had accelerated. I couldn't just ruin him financially anymore. That wasn't enough punishment for a man who wanted to take my mind and my freedom. I needed to destroy him totally. I needed to make sure that when the dust settled, he wasn't just broke. He was buried. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. It was my contact at the district attorney's office. It was late, but she answered. "Linda, it is Sienna Williams. I am sorry to call so late, but I have something for you. No, not a tip. A confession. I have a wire fraud case, a grand larceny case, and an attempted poisoning case. And I have the perpetrator wrapped in a bow. I need you to have a warrant ready for tomorrow morning. Location, the St. James Cathedral. Yes, the wedding. Bring handcuffs. Bring the press. And Linda, bring an ambulance. Because when I am done with him, he is going to be in shock." I hung up. I washed my cup. I went back to bed. And for the first time in months, I slept like a baby. I slept the deep, peaceful sleep of a woman who knows exactly what she is going to wear to a funeral. Her husband's funeral. And I was going to look damn good in red. Saturday arrived with a sky so blue, it felt like a personal insult. The sun was shining down on the sprawling lawn of the Wilson estate in Lake Forest, like a spotlight commanded by God himself. It was the kind of day brides pray for. Perfect temperature, low humidity. A gentle breeze coming off Lake Michigan that rustled the leaves of the 100-year-old oak trees. The estate was transformed into a kingdom of white silk and pale pink roses. There were crystal chandeliers hanging from the branches of the trees. There was a string quartet playing soft, classical music near the entrance, where waiters in white gloves were passing around flutes of champagne that cost more than my first car. It was a fairy tale setting. It was a scene from a movie about the American dream. And standing right in the center of it, waiting at the end of an aisle paved with thousands of white rose petals, was the villain of the story. Terrence looked magnificent. I have to give him that. He was standing under the floral arch, with his hands clasped in front of him, looking every inch the successful venture capitalist he pretended to be. He was wearing a navy blue Armani tuxedo with a black satin lapel. It was tailored to perfection, hugging his broad shoulders and tapering at the waist. He looked powerful. He looked rich. He looked like a man who had the world at his feet. I stood in the shadows of the catering tent about 50 yards away, peering through a gap in the canvas. I felt a surge of nausea mixed with a cold, hard rage. I knew that tuxedo. I knew it intimately. I knew the exact texture of the wool because I was the one who picked it up from the tailor 3 weeks ago, and I knew exactly how much it cost, $4,200. I knew the price because the charge was sitting on my Visa statement right now, accruing interest. He was standing there about to marry another woman wearing clothes that I bought him. He was literally wrapped in my money while he waited to steal hers. He was smiling. It was that dazzling, charismatic smile that had charmed me 7 years ago. He was nodding at the guests as they took their seats. And what a guest list it was. I recognized faces from the business section of the newspaper. There were CEOs of tech companies. There were local politicians. There were socialites wearing hats that looked like sculptures. Harper's father, Mr. Wilson, was a giant in the real estate world, and everyone who wanted a favor from him was here today. Terrence must have felt like he had died and gone to heaven. He was surrounded by the kind of wealth he had always coveted, the kind of power he felt he deserved. I watched him check his watch. He wasn't nervous. Most grooms are nervous on their wedding day. They sweat, they fidget, they look like they might throw up. But not Terrence. He looked relaxed. He looked victorious. And I knew why. In his mind, he had already won. He thought I was at home in our apartment, lying in a pool of my own drool, passed out from the cocktail of sedatives he had slipped into my tea last night. He thought I was paralyzed by a drug-induced depression, a broken woman who would wake up in a psych ward next week while he was sipping Mai Tais in the Maldives. He thought he had committed the perfect crime. He had neutralized the old wife, and he was minutes away from securing the new one. He was probably doing the math in his head right now, calculating exactly how much of the Wilson fortune he could siphon off in the first year. He leaned over and whispered something to his best man, a guy I recognized as one of his gambling buddies from college. They both laughed. It was a smug, conspiratorial laugh. They looked like two wolves in sheep's clothing laughing at the flock they were about to slaughter. The string quartet stopped playing. A hush fell over the crowd. The guests turned their heads toward the back of the garden. The heavy oak doors of the main house opened. The music changed. The cellist began the deep, resonant notes of canon in D. It was beautiful. It was haunting. First came the bridesmaids. They were Harper's friends' girls from her sorority and her country club. They wore dresses of pale lavender and carried bouquets of hydrangeas. They walked with that effortless grace that comes from a lifetime of ballet lessons and debutante balls. They smiled at Terrence. They thought he was Prince Charming. They had no idea he was a monster. Then came the flower girl and the ring bearer. The little boy was carrying a satin pillow. On it sat 2 rings. I zoomed in with the camera lens of my phone, which I was using to watch the details. The rings were platinum bands. Another charge on my credit card, another theft. And then finally the moment arrived. The music swelled. The crowd stood up as one, a sea of expensive fabrics rustling in the breeze. Harper appeared at the top of the stone steps. She took my breath away. She was wearing a gown that must have cost $20,000. It was French lace with a long cathedral train that cascaded behind her like a waterfall of snow. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elegant chignon topped with a diamond tiara. She looked like royalty. She looked like the princess every little girl dreams of being. Her father stood beside her. Mr. Wilson was a large, imposing man with silver hair and a stern face. He looked proud but also protective. He offered his arm to his daughter. Harper took it, and that was when I saw it. That was when I knew she was ready. Harper wasn't smiling. Usually a bride is beaming on her wedding day. She is glowing with happiness, fighting back tears of joy. But Harper's face was stone. Her skin was pale, almost translucent against the white dress. Her lips were pressed together in a thin line. Her eyes were not looking at the guests. They were not looking at the flowers. They were locked on Terrence, and they were cold. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, masked by a veil of icy resolve. She looked like a soldier marching to a firing squad, but she wasn't the prisoner. She was the executioner. Terrence didn't notice. Of course he didn't. He was too busy acting. He wiped a fake tear from his eye for the benefit of the crowd. He put his hand over his heart, feigning being overwhelmed by her beauty. He was playing the part of the love-struck groom so hard, he was blind to the reality walking toward him. He saw the dress. He saw the expensive jewelry. He saw the dollar signs walking down the aisle. He didn't see the woman. He didn't see that her hand was gripping her father's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. He didn't see the way her chest was rising and falling in shallow, controlled breaths. He didn't see that she wasn't walking toward a lover, she was walking toward a target. I felt a surge of pride for her. It takes a spine of steel to walk down an aisle toward a man who called your unborn child a brat and promised to ship it away. It takes incredible strength to let your father give you away to a predator just so you can trap him. Harper was earning her freedom with every step she took in those satin heels. She reached the bottom of the steps. The guests whispered admiringly, "Isn't she beautiful? Look at that dress. What a perfect couple." They had no idea that under that lace bodice Harper was wearing a wire. I had taped it to her skin myself this morning in the bathroom of the country club. It was transmitting everything directly to the van parked outside the gates where 2 FBI agents were listening. She walked past the rows of chairs. She walked past the smiling faces of her aunts and uncles. She walked past the judgment and the expectations of her high society world. She reached the altar. Mr. Wilson kissed her on the cheek. He turned to Terrence and shook his hand firmly. "Take care of my little girl, son," he said. His voice was gruff with emotion. "I will, sir," Terrence said. His voice was smooth, confident. "I will cherish her with my life." Liar. Mr. Wilson stepped back. Harper stepped forward. She stood opposite Terrence under the arch of roses. Terrence reached out and took her hands. "You look breathtaking," he whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. Harper didn't say anything. She just looked at him. She stared deep into his eyes, searching for a soul that wasn't there. She let him hold her hands, the hands he planned to betray. The officiant, a bishop in elaborate robes, cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice booming over the manicured lawn. "We are gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." I adjusted my earpiece. I checked the connection to the large LED screen that was set up behind the bandstand, supposedly for a slideshow of their childhood photos later in the reception. I had hacked into the system 3 hours ago. I had the remote in my pocket. I watched Terrence standing there so tall, so proud. He thought the hard part was over. He thought all he had to do was say 2 words and the money was his. He didn't know that the hard part hadn't even started. He didn't know that the woman standing across from him was holding a grenade. And he didn't know that I was standing 50 yards away with my finger on the pin. The wind picked up, blowing a few rose petals across the altar. It was the calm before the storm. The air felt charged with electricity. The bishop continued speaking about love and faithfulness and honesty. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Every word was an indictment. Every scripture was a lie in Terrence's mouth. I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. "Enjoy this moment, Terrence," I whispered to myself. "Enjoy the sun. Enjoy the suit. Enjoy the fantasy. Because in about 5 minutes, your reality is going to come crashing down, and it is going to be spectacular." The bishop was a man of tradition. He had a deep baritone voice that seemed to vibrate in the chests of everyone sitting in the white folding chairs. He adjusted his spectacles and looked out over the congregation. The silence in the garden was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing out of respect for the solemnity of the moment. The wind had died down, leaving the air heavy and still. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a miracle or a disaster. Terrence was squeezing Harper's hands. I could see the tension in his shoulders relax. He thought he had made it. He thought he had crossed the finish line. He was probably already imagining the wire transfer hitting his account on Monday morning. He was probably mentally browsing listings for luxury cars. He looked at the bishop with a look of mock piety, a look that said, "I am just a humble man accepting this blessing." The bishop cleared his throat. He took a breath that seemed to last forever. And then he asked the question. The question that is usually just a formality in modern weddings. The question that nobody ever answers. If there is anyone here present who knows of any just cause why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Usually this is the part where the guests smile politely at each other. Maybe a baby coos or someone coughs nervously. It is a rhetorical question. It is a relic of a time when village secrets were whispered in the pews. In high society weddings like this, nobody objects. It is simply not done. It is rude. It is messy. And these people hated messes. Terrence smiled. It was a small, victorious twitch of his lips. He started to turn back toward Harper, ready to say his vows, ready to seal the deal. And then the noise tore through the air. It wasn't a voice. It was a high-pitched screech of electronic feedback. It was the sound of a microphone being tapped aggressively against a speaker. It was loud and harsh and ugly. It sounded like a scream. Screech, thump, thump. Every head in the garden whipped around. The guests in the back row jumped. Mr. Wilson frowned, looking around for the sound engineer. The bishop looked confused, peering over his glasses. But Terrence froze. He didn't turn around immediately. He went rigid. His back stiffened like he had been shot. He knew that sound. He knew that rhythm. It wasn't an accident. It was an interruption. I stepped out from behind the heavy velvet curtains of the bandstand. I was not wearing the beige or pastel colors that the guests were wearing. I was not blending in. I was wearing red, a deep blood-red silk dress that hugged every curve of my body and flowed behind me like a river of fire. I had bought it yesterday. It was the color of danger. It was the color of a stop sign. It was the color of the scarlet letter that society tries to pin on women like me, but today I was pinning it on him. I walked slowly onto the grass. The click of my heels was muffled by the lawn, but my presence was loud. I held my head high. I didn't look crazy. I didn't look like the mental patient Terrence had described to his loan shark. I looked like a queen who had come to reclaim her throne. In my right hand, I held an iPad. It was black and sleek, and it was connected via Bluetooth to the massive LED screen behind the altar, the one that was supposed to show a montage of their love story later that evening. My thumb was hovering over the control panel. A murmur went through the crowd. "Who is that? Is that a performer? Is this part of the show?" Then Terrence turned around. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a physical magic trick. One moment he was flushed with triumph. The next he was as gray as wet cement. His eyes bulged. His mouth opened but no sound came out. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. He looked at the red dress. He looked at the iPad. And then he looked at my eyes. He saw no mercy there. He took a stumbling step back, releasing Harper's hands. He almost tripped over her train. "Sienna," he mouthed. It was a silent, desperate prayer. "Sienna." I didn't stop walking. I marched right down the center aisle. The guests parted for me instinctively like the Red Sea. They could feel the heat radiating off me. They could smell the ozone of impending destruction. I stopped 10 feet away from the altar. I stood there alone in my red dress, a vivid slash of violence against the pristine white wedding. I lifted the microphone I had taken from the bandstand. I brought it to my lips. My hand was steady. My voice was calm, cold, and professional. It was the voice I used when I testified in federal court. "I object," I said. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. The crowd gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the garden. Mr. Wilson stepped forward, his face darkening with anger. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Security, get this woman out of here." I ignored him. I kept my eyes locked on Terrence. I watched him crumble. I watched the sweat instantly bead on his forehead. I watched him look for an exit, but there was nowhere to run. "I object," I repeated louder this time, my voice echoing off the stone facade of the mansion. I tapped the screen of my iPad. Behind Terrence, the massive LED screen flickered to life. It didn't show photos of him and Harper. It showed a document, a high-resolution scan of a marriage license. My marriage license. I object because the groom seems to have forgotten a very important detail, I said, gesturing to the screen. He forgot to divorce his ex-wife. I paused, letting the words land. Which is me. The crowd erupted. People stood up. Whispers turned into shouts. Oh my God, he is married. Who is she? Terrence waved his hands, frantically trying to regain control. No, folks, listen. She is lying. She is my sister. She is mentally ill. She just got out of a facility. She doesn't know what she is saying. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just tapped the iPad again. The image on the screen changed. It was a video, a grainy night vision video taken from a hidden camera in a living room. It showed Terrence pacing on a balcony smoking a cigar. The audio was crystal clear. I am going to put her in a psych ward, Vinny, the voice on the video said. Terrence's voice. That old black wife of mine is worth more to me crazy than she is sane. She is just a stepping stone man. A rusty old stepping stone. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of horror. Terrence looked at the screen, then back at me. He looked like a rat trapped in a corner. He looked at the guests who were now staring at him with open disgust. He looked at Mr. Wilson, whose face had turned a dangerous shade of purple. But I wasn't done. I had one more nail to drive into his coffin. And I object. I continued, my voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife, because he also forgot to pay his primary investor. I tapped the screen again. A spreadsheet appeared. It was complex, but the bottom line was simple. It showed unauthorized withdrawals. It showed gambling debts. It showed the purchase of the engagement ring on Harper's finger using my credit card. The investor he forgot to pay is also me, I said. I took a step closer to him. I was close enough to smell his fear. It smelled like sweat and cheap cologne. I am Sienna Williams, I announced to the crowd. I am a senior forensic auditor, and for the last 7 years, I have been funding this man's life. I bought the suit he is wearing. I bought the ring on the bride's finger. I paid for the car he drove here in, and I am currently the owner of the debt that he is trying to marry your daughter to pay off. I looked at Harper. She was standing frozen like a statue, but I saw the tiny nod she gave me. It was barely perceptible. It was our signal. Terrence tried one last desperate Hail Mary. He lunged toward Harper, grabbing her arm. Harper, baby, listen to me. She is crazy. Those are deep fakes, AI generated. You know me. You know I love you. Tell them to get her out of here. Harper looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked up at his face. Her expression didn't change. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just pulled her arm away. Slowly, deliberately. She reached up and took off the veil. She dropped it on the ground. Then she took off the 3-carat diamond ring. She held it up. The sunlight caught the stone, turning it into a prism of blinding light. She looked at me. Then she looked at Terrence. I think this belongs to the investor, she said. And she tossed the ring. It sailed through the air in a perfect arc. Time seemed to slow down. Terrence watched it fly. He actually reached out to try and catch it, his greed overriding his dignity. But he missed. The ring landed in the grass at my feet. I didn't pick it up. I stepped on it. I ground the heel of my red stiletto into the soft earth, burying the diamond in the dirt. I looked at Terrence. He was panting. He was shaking. He looked around the garden and saw 200 enemies. He saw his wealthy friends turning their backs. He saw the security guards moving in not toward me, but toward him. You wanted a wedding, Terrence? I said, my voice soft now just for him. You wanted a spectacle. You wanted everyone to look at you. I spread my arms wide, my red dress billowing in the wind. Well, look around, baby. All eyes are on you. And then from the distance came the sound I had been waiting for. Not the wedding bells, but the sirens. The wail of police sirens grew louder and louder, getting closer to the estate. Terrence heard them too. His eyes widened. He realized finally that this wasn't just a breakup. This was a raid. He looked at me one last time. There was no love left, only hate. Pure, unadulterated hate. You bitch, he hissed. You ruined everything. I smiled. It was the coldest smile I have ever smiled. "No, Terrence," I said. "I just audited you, and you failed." The garden was dead silent, but the giant LED screen behind the altar was screaming the truth. The image of our marriage license was burned into every retina in that crowd. It was 20 feet high and 10 feet wide. You could see the date. You could see the signatures. You could see the official county seal. There was no denying it. There was no calling it a deep fake. It was a government document, and it was staring Terrence right in the face. He looked back at the screen, and then he looked at me. His eyes were wild, darting around like an animal caught in a trap. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to spin another lie about how I forged it, or how it was an annulled document from a past life. But I didn't give him the chance. I didn't give him a single second to breathe. I tapped my iPad again. The image on the screen vanished and was replaced by a video player. The audio system, which had been set up to play romantic violin music, suddenly crackled with the sound of static, and then a voice boomed out over the speakers. It was a voice everyone knew. It was Terrence's voice. The video was shaky. It had been filmed vertically on a phone hidden in a purse. The angle was low, looking up from a coffee table. It showed Terrence pacing around a living room. It was Harper's living room. He was on the phone holding a glass of scotch. He didn't know he was being recorded. He thought Harper was in the shower, but Harper had left her phone propped up against a vase recording everything. The audio was crystal clear. "Yeah, I know she is annoying," Terrence said on the video. He took a sip of his drink and made a face of disgust. "God, she is so clingy. She follows me around like a puppy." "Terry, do you love me? Terry, are you excited about the baby?" It makes me want to puke. The crowd in the garden gasped, a collective intake of breath that sounded like a physical blow. Harper stood on the altar, her face pale but her eyes dry. She had heard this already. She had recorded it. But hearing it amplified over the estate speakers in front of 300 people was a different kind of pain. Terrence on the screen continued laughing cruelly. "Look, I just need to get through the wedding. Once the ring is on her finger, I have access to the family trust. Her dad is worth $50 million. I did the math. If I knock her up again next year, I can leverage the kids for a bigger allowance. I am going to milk this family dry, and then I am going to find myself a nice bachelor pad in Miami. Harper can stay here and change diapers. She is just a cow to me, man. A cash cow." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the kind of silence that precedes a riot. Mr. Wilson Harper's father looked like he had been shot. His face went from red to a terrifying shade of gray. He was clutching his chest, his eyes wide with horror and betrayal. He had welcomed this man into his home. He had shaken his hand. He had trusted him with his daughter. And now he knew. He was looking at a predator who had planned to eat his family alive. Terrence was shaking. He was looking at the guests, and he saw the change. 5 minutes ago, they looked at him with envy. Now they looked at him with a hatred so pure it was palpable. He held up his hands, palms out in a gesture of surrender. "It is a lie," he screamed, his voice cracking. "That is AI. That is voice cloning. I never said that. She is framing me." I stepped forward, my red dress flowing around me like armor. "You want to talk about math, Terrence?" I said, my voice calm and amplified by the microphone. "You want to talk about milking families dry? Let's look at the numbers." I swiped the screen on my iPad. A new image appeared. It was a bank statement, but not just any statement. It was the financial record for the Wilson Family Foundation, the charity that Harper ran to help underprivileged children. I zoomed in on a series of transactions. Date October 14th. Withdrawal $15,000. Recipient T Squared Consulting. Date November 2nd. Withdrawal $20,000. Recipient T Squared Consulting. Date November 10th. Withdrawal $35,000. Recipient T Squared Consulting. I pointed at the screen. T Squared Consulting is a shell company registered to Terrence Williams, I announced. There are no employees. There is no office. There is only a P.O. box in Nevada. And for the last 3 months, while he was pretending to help Harper with her charity gala, he was siphoning money out of the donation fund. He wasn't just stealing from Harper. He was stealing from orphans. He was stealing from sick children. The crowd erupted. This was the final straw. Cheating is one thing, being a gold digger is one thing, but stealing from a charity meant for kids, that is a special kind of evil that even the most cynical socialite cannot forgive. Shouts of monster and thief rang out from the audience. People were standing up, knocking over their chairs. Terrence looked at the screen, and he knew it was over. The denial died in his throat. He looked at the bank statement, and he saw his own signature at the bottom of the unauthorized transfer forms. He saw his prison sentence written in black and white pixels. He snapped. The facade of the charming gentleman completely disintegrated. His face twisted into a mask of pure animalistic rage. He looked at me, and he didn't see his wife anymore. He saw the architect of his destruction. "You bitch!" he roared. He lunged. He didn't run away. He didn't try to escape. He wanted to hurt me. He sprinted down the aisle toward where I was standing. His hands curled into claws. His teeth bared like a wild dog. He wanted to choke the life out of me. He wanted to silence the voice that was exposing him. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground because I knew I wasn't alone. Just as Terrence reached the front row, a figure blurred into motion from the side. It was Brad, Harper's brother, the corporate lawyer who had spent the last 24 hours seething with quiet rage waiting for this exact moment. Brad didn't tackle him. He stepped into his path and threw a right hook that was so technically perfect it looked like it belonged in a boxing ring. Crack! The sound of fist-meeting jaw echoed across the garden. It was a sickening, satisfying crunch. Terrence's head snapped back. His momentum stopped instantly. He spun around once from the force of the blow and crashed to the ground. He landed in the dirt right next to the rose petals he had walked on moments ago. He groaned, trying to push himself up. Blood was pouring from his nose, staining his white shirt. His perfect Armani tuxedo was ruined. His perfect face was broken. Brad stood over him, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked down at the man who had called his sister a cow. "That was for the trust fund," Brad said calmly. Terrence tried to crawl. He was disoriented, spitting blood. He looked up and saw Mr. Wilson standing there. The older man lifted his cane, ready to strike, but Harper stepped in. "No, Dad," Harper said. Her voice was strong. "Don't dirty your hands on him. He isn't worth it." Terrence looked around frantically. He tried to get to his feet, stumbling toward the exit. "I am leaving," he sputtered. "You people are crazy. I am suing all of you." He made it about 3 steps before the hedges at the back of the garden parted. They didn't come in with sirens blaring. They came in with quiet, terrifying efficiency. 6 men and women in blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. FBI. They swarmed him. They didn't ask him to stop. They tackled him. 2 agents slammed him face first into the grass. I watched as they pulled his arms behind his back. "Terrence Williams, you are under arrest," one of the agents shouted. Terrence was screaming now. "Get off me! You can't do this! I am a businessman!" The agent ignored him. He recited the charges loud enough for everyone to hear. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, and interstate money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The metallic click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I have ever heard. It was better than music. It was the sound of justice closing its jaws. The agents hauled him up. He looked pathetic. Dirt and grass stains on his knees, blood on his face, his hair wild. He looked at Harper. "Harper, tell them," he begged. "Tell them I love you." Harper looked at him. She touched her stomach. "My baby doesn't have a father," she said, "and I don't have a husband. Goodbye, Terrence." The agents started to drag him away. They marched him back down the aisle, the same aisle he had walked down 10 minutes ago as a conqueror. Now he was a prisoner. The guests didn't look away. They took out their phones. They recorded every step of his walk of shame. Flashbulbs went off like strobe lights, illuminating his failure. As they dragged him past me, he stopped fighting. He looked at me. His eyes were full of confusion. He still didn't understand how the wife he thought was stupid, the wife he thought was a stepping stone, had orchestrated this entire symphony of destruction. How he whispered. I leaned in close so only he could hear. "I told you, Terrence. I am an auditor, and I found a discrepancy." The agents shoved him forward, and he disappeared into the back of an unmarked black van. The doors slammed shut. The garden was quiet again. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a strange sense of peace. I looked at Harper. She was crying now, but they were different tears. She was hugging her father. Brad was patting her back. They were a family again, unbroken. I looked at the empty altar. The wedding was over. The marriage was over. The lie was over. I turned off my iPad. The screen went black. My work here was done. I smoothed down my red dress, adjusted my bag, and turned to walk away. I didn't need to stay for the reception. I had my own celebration to attend. I had a bottle of champagne chilling in my fridge at home and a divorce lawyer waiting for my call on Monday morning. I walked out of the estate past the stunned guests, past the waiters holding trays of untouched drinks. I walked to my car, my heels clicking on the pavement. I took a deep breath of the fresh lake air. It tasted like freedom. Terrence was gone. The debt was gone. The fear was gone. I was Sienna Williams. I was 34 years old. I was single. And I was the most dangerous woman in Chicago. The Cook County Correctional Center is a cold, gray place. It smells like concrete and despair. The fluorescent lights buzz with a sound that gets under your skin, and the air is stale with the breath of men who have lost everything. I had been here many times before to interview white-collar criminals for my fraud investigations, but today was different. Today I wasn't here for a client. I was here for a funeral. Not a funeral for a body, but a funeral for a marriage. I sat in the small interrogation room, my hands folded neatly on the metal table. I was wearing a white suit, pristine, impeccable, the color of a clean slate. The heavy steel door clanked open, and a guard let him in. Terrence looked bad. It had only been 48 hours since the wedding, but he looked like he had aged 10 years. His expensive haircut was matted. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot. The bruise on his jaw where Brad had punched him was blooming into a magnificent shade of purple and green. He sat down opposite me. The shackles around his wrists clinked against the table. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and confusion. He still didn't understand. His arrogance was so deep it was blocking the reality from sinking in. "You came," he rasped. His voice was hoarse. I nodded slowly. "I came. You need to get me out of here, Sienna," he said, leaning forward as much as the chains would allow. "This is a misunderstanding. The lawyers I called, they won't take my case. They say the evidence is overwhelming. You have to help me. You are my wife. You can't testify against me." Spousal privilege, right? I almost laughed. It was pathetic, really. He was still trying to play the angle, still trying to use me. "I am not here as your wife, Terrence," I said, my voice cool and detached. "I am here as the victim of your crimes, and spousal privilege doesn't apply when the crime is against the spouse." He slammed his hands on the table. "Stop playing games, just pay the bail. Get me out and we can fix this. I can explain everything. Harper, she seduced me. She tricked me. It was a setup." I stared at him. I stared at the man I had slept next to for 7 years, the man I had cooked for, the man I had loved, and I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just indifference. He was a stranger to me now, a bad investment I had finally written off. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I slid it across the table. "What is this?" he asked, looking down at it. "That is a summary of your financial situation," I said. He scanned the document, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean? Where are the assets? Where is the crypto? Where is the equity from the condo?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs. "There is no crypto. Terrence, there never was. And the condo, I sold it yesterday." He looked up, his eyes wide. You sold our home." "My home," I corrected. "It was in my name. And the proceeds, they are gone." "Gone," he whispered. "Invested," I said, smiling. "In a blind trust. In the Cayman Islands. A trust that is irrevocable and untouchable by any court order or any divorce settlement. You see, Terrence, from the moment I saw you in that restaurant, I started moving money. Every cent we had in joint accounts, every stock, every bond, I liquidated it. I transferred it. I hid it so deep that even God couldn't find it." He started to shake. But we are married. Half of that is mine." I shook my head. "Not when you are convicted of fraud against your spouse. Under the Proceeds of Crime Act, I petitioned the court to freeze your share as restitution for the money you stole from me over the years. The gambling debts, the credit card theft, the money you stole from my mother. It all adds up, Terrence. I tapped the paper with my manicured fingernail. You are broke. You have $0, 0 cents. You can't afford a lawyer? You can't afford bail? You can't even afford a pack of cigarettes in the commissary. He stared at the paper like it was a death warrant. And there is one more thing, I added. I pulled out a second document, a civil lawsuit. This is for the emotional distress, the fraud, the defamation. You owe me $1.5 million, Terrence. And since you can't pay it, I have a lien on your future earnings. That means for the rest of your life, every time you make $1.50 of it belongs to me. If you write a book from prison, I get half. If you get a job mopping floors when you get out in 20 years, I get half. 20 years, he choked out. Federal charges carry mandatory minimums, I said, standing up. Wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, and let's not forget the attempted poisoning. Oh yes, I kept the cup. The lab results came back this morning. High levels of sedatives. That is attempted assault, Terrence. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw true fear, the kind of fear that breaks a man. He realized the walls were closing in and there was no door. He realized he had messed with the wrong woman. Sienna, please, he begged, tears streaming down his face. Please don't leave me here. I will die in here. Vinny, he has guys on the inside. They will kill me. I looked down at him. I hope you have good health insurance, I said. Oh, wait, you don't. I canceled that too. I turned and walked toward the door. Sienna, he screamed. Sienna, come back, you bitch. You can't do this. I made you. You are nothing without me. I didn't look back. I signaled the guard. The heavy steel door slammed shut, cutting off his screams. I walked down the long corridor, my heels clicking on the concrete. I walked out into the bright sunshine of the parking lot. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like victory. 6 months later. The restaurant Le Monde was buzzing with the Friday night crowd. It was loud and vibrant, filled with the clinking of glasses and the laughter of people who had no idea how complicated life could be. The air still smelled like truffle oil and old money. I walked in and the hostess smiled. Welcome back, Ms. Williams. Your table is ready. She led me through the dining room, past the couples, holding hands, past the business dinners. We walked to the back to the private alcove behind the partition. Table 7. I sat down in the velvet booth. It was the same booth where Terrence had proposed to Harper, the same booth where my life had fallen apart. But tonight, it didn't feel like a crime scene. It felt like a throne room. I looked around. The decor hadn't changed, but I had. My hair was different, cut into a sharp bob that framed my face. I was wearing a dress I bought with my own bonus check, not a credit card linked to a man's lies. A waiter approached the table. It wasn't Jamal. Good evening, ma'am, he said. Can I start you off with something? Yes, I said. A bottle of the Chateau Margaux, please. Excellent choice. And will you be waiting for anyone? I smiled. No, just me. I pulled out my phone while I waited. I opened Instagram. The first post on my feed was from Harper. It was a photo of a baby, a beautiful chubby-cheeked baby boy with curly hair and big brown eyes. He was laughing. Harper was holding him her face free of makeup, looking tired but radiantly happy. The caption read, "My little warrior. We don't need a king to build our castle. #single mom, #survivor, #new beginnings." I liked the photo. Harper and I still talked once a week. She was doing well. She had taken over her father's charitable foundation and turned it into a powerhouse for helping victims of domestic financial abuse. She was tough now. She had scars, but scars are just proof that you survived. I scrolled down. A news article popped up. Disgraced venture capitalist sentenced to 25 years. I didn't click on it. I didn't need to read it. I was there in the courtroom when the gavel came down. I saw the look on Terrence's face as they led him away. It was a memory I would cherish forever. The waiter returned with the wine. He poured a glass, the rich red liquid swirling in the crystal. I took a sip. It was perfect, complex, bold, with a finish that lingered. Someone cleared their throat near my table. I looked up. A young man was standing there holding a tray of espressos. He was wearing a sharp suit, not a waiter's uniform. Jamal. Hey, 'cause he grinned. I smiled, putting my glass down. Look at you. You look like a boss. I feel like one, he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. The coffee shop is booming, Sienna. We have lines around the block every morning. I can't thank you enough for the investment. I waved my hand. It wasn't a gift, Jamal. It was a loan. And you are paying it back ahead of schedule. That is good business. He laughed. You are always the auditor, aren't you? Always, I said. He leaned in, lowering his voice. I heard about the sentencing. 25 years, that is intense. It is justice, I said. He played a high-stakes game, Jamal. He bet his life against my intelligence, and the house always wins. Jamal shook his head, looking at me with admiration. Remind me never to cross you, Sienna. I laughed, clinking my glass against his espresso cup. Just keep the coffee hot and the books balanced and we will be fine. He drank his coffee and stood up. I have to get back to the shop. Late night rush. But I wanted to stop by and say, I am proud of you. You turned a nightmare into a masterclass. Thanks, Jamal. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I sat there alone in the busy restaurant. I looked at the empty seat across from me. 6 months ago, seeing that empty seat would have broken me. It would have made me feel lonely and rejected. But tonight the empty seat represented peace. It represented freedom. It meant I didn't have to worry about lies or debts or another woman's perfume. It meant the only person responsible for my happiness was me. I picked up my glass and held it up to the light. The wine glowed like a ruby. I thought about Terrence sitting in his cell, probably eating cold gruel right now. I thought about the text he sent me that night. I'm stuck at work. Well, Terrence, I thought, taking a slow, deliberate sip. You were right about one thing. You are stuck in a box for the next 2 decades. And me, I looked out the window at the lights of Chicago shining bright and full of promise. I am just getting started. I raised my glass in a silent toast to myself, to Harper, to every woman who has ever been underestimated. Betraying a smart Black woman is the fastest way to book a one-way ticket to hell. Cheers.